Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello everyone. Now let's talk about our last topic here, that is challenges to free and fair elections. Now before the students, we were talking about the measures taken to ensure free and fair elections, where we talked about the allegations that are made after every elections. When we are talking about the political parties, they make accusations, allegations, right? We also talked about how can we ensure free and fair elections, where we discussed about the Independent Election Commission. We also talked about the people's participation in elections. Now the last topic here is challenges to free and fair elections, where we have to focus on certain points, right? So what are the challenges when we are talking about or trying to ensure that there should be free and fair elections in our country? So the first point here is that candidates and parties with a lot of money, they may not be sure of their victory, but they enjoy an advantage over smaller parties. Now students, before this you must have heard the term, we have learnt about this earlier, right? We talked about the muscle power, right? The candidates that can use the muscle power, or they can use money to bribe people, they can distribute money in different areas so that votes can come in their own favor, to get more vote back. So the whole idea here is that the candidates and parties, they are having a lot of money, who have a lot of money, they may not be sure about the victory. But when we are talking or when we are comparing these candidates and these political parties with lots and lots of money and comparing it with the smaller parties, they definitely have a certain advantage over these smaller parties, right? So they can use their money, they can spend their money, and they can advertise well, they can also give money, distribute money to the people, and they can ask for the votes. Sometimes this can happen in the country, okay? The second point here is that candidates with criminal connection have been able to push others out of the electoral race. So here you already have read when we are talking about the filing of the nomination form. In that we talked about the candidates, who have served for 2 years or more, or who have to serve for 2 years or more, who have done any offense or with any criminal connection, they are not allowed to contest in elections, right? Or if they have done or they have gone to jail for any offense, they have to make or they have to report it while they are filing their nomination form. So these candidates with any criminal connection, definitely they have muscle power, right? So therefore, they try to push others out of the electoral race, and they try to secure a ticket from major parties. Now this can happen, and this is a serious challenge to free and fair elections. So this is the second point, quite simple to understand. The third point here is that very often election offers little choice to ordinary citizens. Now in what context are we talking about here? When we talk about the elections, sometimes what happens that the ordinary citizens, the people who are voting, they have a very little choice. In context that both the major parties, they are quite similar to each other, both in the policies and practice. Yes, students, a major point that we need to understand. We already have talked about a point where people, they need to have free and open discussions. They need to understand the policies and agendas of the political parties, and then they can make a fair decision on whom they want to vote or whom they want to elect and want to be their leader. Correct or not? So here what happens, sometimes these ordinary people who are going to vote, who are going to elect, they are left with a very little choice. When these major parties, they have similar ideas, similar policies, similar ideologies, or similar agendas, political agendas that we are talking about. Now this is again a serious challenge to free and fair elections. Another important point that we have to keep in mind here is that some families, they tend to dominate political parties and they try to distribute tickets to their relatives. Now what happens? That you will find, again you can have several examples related to this. In our country we have so many parties where people from the same family, they are running, they are ruling, and they are being the head of the political party, and other people who are hailing from that party, they do not get the chance to lead the party, to be the president of the party. You can have different examples here, but what we need to understand here is that they tend to dominate the political parties, and also they are distributing the party tickets to their relatives. Okay, now do you think that this is a good thing or a bad thing? Definitely, students, here what happens that not everyone is a good leader. So when people, some families that tend to dominate the political parties and distributing the party tickets to their relatives, they are trying to impose their power there, right? So this imposition of power, is it a good thing? Definitely not. So therefore it becomes a challenge to free and fair elections. Last but not the least, one important point that you have to keep in mind is that the smaller parties and independent candidates, they also suffer a huge disadvantage compared to the bigger parties. Now we also have learned that independent candidates, they can also contest in elections, right? And also the Election Commission of India, they give them separate symbols. But are they going to win the elections? Fighting alone, can they win the election from the big parties, the major parties? Definitely not. So therefore, they have to suffer a huge disadvantage when we are comparing them with the major parties, the big parties, the popular parties. Okay? And these challenges that we have been talking about, students, it's not common to India only. Elsewhere, we can also see that certain challenges are faced by these countries, let's say US, European countries, Western countries in general, and wherever we have a democratic form of government, wherever elections are taking place. So these challenges are being faced by those countries as well. So here we have to understand that citizens, they have a big responsibility of choosing their representative. So therefore they have to do it very wisely. Now students, we have completed this chapter here. We have understood so many facets here, so many important points related to elections, how elections are conducted in our country, the measures taken to ensure that there should be free and fair elections, and last but not the least, we have talked about the challenges to free and fair elections. So I hope that each and every point has been clear here. So please read the whole chapter to understand the important points that we have discussed here in the following presentation. Thank you very much.